My Uncle Carl is a character, to say the least. He spent a lot of his 20s as a sailboat captain in the Caribbean. He would take care of some rich person's sailboat in the off season by living on the boat and doing routine maintenance. And then when the owners would come down, he would sail them around all the different islands. A couple of times, he'd even take boats like up and down the East Coast. And one time, he even sailed solo across the Atlantic to Portugal. And as you might imagine, he got a lot of sun. He didn't have a regular barber, and he didn't have the chance to come home very often. If he did, it was usually unannounced. And one time, he showed up, and my mom, Flo, who was still in middle or high school at the time, answered the door. And she's looking out, and there in front of her is this very dark guy with long bleach blonde hair, holes in his shirt, a missing tooth, a shackle in his ear, the very image of a pirate. And she's about to walk away and leave him at the door and call the cops. And my uncle is like, "Look, it's me, Carl." And then she recognizes him because she hears his voice. But she was about to leave him there. She didn't want any business with him. So we've been talking about wounds and doctors and appointments the last few weeks, right? Sin is a wound. Jesus is the doctor. Confession is our appointment. Sounds like we're pretty set, right? Well, the last thing that we need is our prescription. Walking out of confession is a bit like being checked out of a hospital. We might have just been saved from a serious illness or injury, but if we don't take time to receive our treatment, then we will never fully heal. And what is the treatment that Jesus gives us? He gives us grace. Our justification comes from the grace of God. Grace is favor, the free and undeserved help that God gives us to respond to his call to become children of God, adoptive sons, partakers of the divine nature and of eternal life. That's from the Catechism. Each sacrament is a source of grace for different aspects of our lives. In confirmation, marriage, and holy orders, we receive grace for a specific vocation, while the other sacraments offer grace for healing. In baptism, we receive the grace that washes away original sin. In confession, we receive the grace that washes away mortal sins. In the Eucharist, we receive the grace that washes away venial sins. There's plenty of grace to go around. In fact, there's more than we could ever possibly need. Now, if there's so much grace, how could it be that sometimes we walk out of confession, or we come away from receiving Jesus in the Eucharist, feeling like nothing's really changed? Well, the grace is all there. The hard part is just receiving. Remember my mom and my pirate uncle? Carl was all there. My mom just wasn't buying it. She wasn't ready to receive him because she didn't recognize him. Now, of course, I'm not advocating for letting every random stranger on your doorstep into your house. But we do have to take the time to recognize and become familiar with Jesus so that we can receive him into our hearts. If we don't recognize him, we might just end up leaving him on the doorstep. And we have to take regular time to allow his grace to work in our lives and heal our wounds of sin. What are some practical steps to stay on track with our prescription of grace? Well, think about what your penance usually is when you go to confession. Most of the time, priests tell us to either pray, read part of the Bible, or spend some time in silence with Jesus. These are some of the main ingredients in Jesus' medicine cabinet, and we shouldn't just confine our partaking of them to whenever the priest tells us to do so in penance. Pray every day, when you get up and when you go to bed. It doesn't have to be long. Tell him about your day, what you're looking forward to, what you're afraid of, where you struggled, and where you succeeded, and invite his Holy Spirit into those parts of your life. Read the Bible every day. Treat him like a father by trusting him and following his advice. Go to adoration if you can. Adoration is so great because it gives us a time to gaze at Jesus and let him gaze back at us without having to say anything. In adoration, we learn to recognize his presence and become familiar with him so that in the busyness of our lives, we can still recognize and receive him, even when he shows up unexpectedly on the doorstep. So these are Jesus medications that he prescribes for us. But it's also really easy to fill our lives to the point that we barely have time for any of those prescriptions. Maybe that looks like habitually scrolling through some app on your phone, or gossiping with your friends, or maybe just eating as much chocolate as you want. Ash Wednesday is this week, and whether you've already decided what you're going to give up for life or not, I encourage you not just to give something up, but to fill the time that you would have spent doing that thing with one of Jesus' prescriptions. The point of Lent is not to punish ourselves, but to push ourselves to grow closer to Jesus, to replace the things that we receive out of self-love with things that we receive out of love for Jesus, so that ultimately we can receive him into our hearts. Now, hopefully the story of my pirate uncle also reminds you of Jesus' own parable of the prodigal son, who abandons his father and his brother and wastes his inheritance in the city until he's reduced to feeding pigs. When the prodigal son decides to return home and ask his father for forgiveness, he must have looked somewhat similar to my uncle, with dirty, tattered clothes and long, messy hair. However, in spite of all this, his father still recognizes him and comes running out of the house to receive him back. God the Father will always recognize us and welcome us back if we seek to receive his forgiveness and healing. God is always with us in every moment of our lives. We need him not in the sense that we don't have him, but rather that we don't always let him into our hearts. It is up to us to take that prescription of grace, to pray and listen and watch for him, and to recognize and receive him when he knocks. I didn't notice, that's fine.
Yeah, that's it. You look like him.
Yeah.
Like that's what he looked like when he came to the door.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, he had like a big golden hair in his or big ring.
Looks like different. Looks like cool.
Yeah, he just looked good in the picture. My mom didn't have a good picture, but she was about to like pull a costume.
Okay, we're gonna go to small group, guys.